we have with us today Mr. Andrew Long, who's the CEO of HSBC Bank Oman. Welcome to the show, Mr. Long. How have things been with you during this current pandemic?
Well, as you can see, I'm working from home as opposed to working from the office, but that's the same as most of my colleagues are doing as well.
Sure. So how has HSBC Oman gone about in its response as the pandemic has escalated, and how have you ensured that business continues as usual?
Well, before I answer what we've done in Oman, it's just worth recalling that I was working in Hong Kong in 2003 when the SARS crisis came. And many of the lessons that we learned then we're applying across the group, HSBC group today. So history does have a habit of repeating itself. But in terms of what we're doing in Oman, our focus has been on helping staff and customers health-wise, but also in terms of helping our customers from a business continuity angle. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that it's business as usual.
Sure. And anything specifically that you've done, any specific measures that you have taken?
Well, again, from a health-wise, we've over 90% of our staff in the head office are now working from home. In the branches, we've split our colleagues in the branches into two teams. So they're working 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off to give them some health break. We've got the usual health support and aids in terms of masks, gloves, and disinfectant, which we also make available to our customers when they come to the branches and the offices. In terms of business, there's two aspects. One is the retail aspect, where we're following all the central bank guidelines in terms of giving loan deferments or in some cases loan waivers. But also we've reduced fees on credit cards. Some of our ATM transactions, we've reduced fees. We've increased some of our credit card limits. We've increased the contactless payment limit for people paying in retail outlets. And we've reduced the outward TT charges for local transfers for our customers. So quite a lot of effort in the retail space.
Sure.
And then in the wholesale space also, we've been strongly working on the digital story, which is worth expanding on later. But also, again, listening to requests for changes in credit terms, repayment terms, and being as helpful as we can.
Sure. So you spoke about what you're doing with your staff, your employees, and your customers. What have you done for the community at large?
I mean, HSBC Group globally has established a $25 million global fund to help communities that have been impacted by this pandemic. And here in Oman, we have our own particular initiatives that we've worked with organizations like Dar Alata and others trying to help families in need. We've also worked with the Ministry of Health in terms of deep cleaning a couple of the health centers in Amarat and one other elsewhere. Just trying to find ways of supporting those in particular need who aren't necessarily business customers.
One big shift which has been brought about by the pandemic has been the shift towards digitalization, and it led to a lot of technology enablement. I know HSBC Oman was already working in that direction. As a group, you're very strong. Is there anything new that you have tried out because of the pandemic? Is there something that was being done but has been accelerated because of the pandemic?
You know, what's very interesting is our corporate customer base in particular has been very focused on trying to avoid face-to-face contact. And we're quite fortunate. We have a very strong HSBC Net platform, which allows us to give a digital service to our customers. And we're now processing over 97% of our payments from wholesale banking customers digitally. The other, even more startling, is that in the trade services space for our import-export customers, whereas in January last year we were processing 6% digitally, as of today we're about 79, 77%. That's an astonishing growth because customers have found it so much more convenient not to have to deliver documents and payment instructions face to face. They can do it now across the telephone wires, across the internet. And that's been a huge impact, both from the efficiency of the customer base, but also from the health of the customer base. And similarly, on the consumer side, we've enhanced our application, our mobile banking app, allowing customers to do more on the mobile banking app rather than just, again, coming face to face into the branches.
A risk that you run when you're having a large-scale operation on digital is cybersecurity. And so I know HSBC has invested a lot in cybersecurity in the past. Has that really stood you in good stead now?
I think one of the advantages of being part of an enormous group like the HSBC group is we don't have to rely on just a few dozen IT experts in Oman working for us, but we have the whole resource of the group to fall back on. And the group has a huge investment in cybersecurity globally. And we also have very strong data center protocols to facilitate that. So both people and systems are geared towards protecting the HSBC group's stakeholders. That's our staff, our customers and our regulators and anyone else who's working with us from cybersecurity. And we have a very strong track record. Nobody's perfect, but our own particular track record is as good as most, I would suspect.
Sure. How was your business performance last year? And the biggest challenge that most CEOs face is what happens next from here. How do you keep your business running? How do you run a profitable operation? So, if you can take us a bit through your performance of 2019, and how are you facing the challenges that the pandemic has unleashed?
2019 was a good year. It wasn't quite as good as 2018 for a couple of reasons, but largely it was because of a shift in our ECL, or our credit provisions line. The introduction of IFRS 9 as an accounting standard in the beginning of 2018 has created much more discipline about looking at projected losses. And we as a group are always very conservative. We're usually more conservative, as conservative or more conservative than the central bank requirements where we operate. And so we found quite a large increase in our ECL provisions last year, as well as we've seen rising cost of deposits across the whole sector here in Oman. The banks are paying more for deposits. Liquidity is a little bit tighter. And so those two key impacts have drove a small decline. I think it was a 5 or 6% decline in our profit last year, but a satisfactory result. This year, very different, and I think banks are quite right to be concerned about the change in credit losses that the sectors globally might see. And we saw big international banks taking significant provisions at the first quarter globally under the IFRS 9 accounting standards. And I don't think that'll be any different in most countries where we operate.
If you can just do a bit of crystal gazing, I know it's a difficult task at the current juncture. But just looking ahead, where do you think in terms of business things are headed from here? Do you think that things will improve in the next 3 to 6 months?
Compared to the last 3 months, I think anything is going to be better. But in terms of will it be the same as last year? No, I don't think so anywhere in the world. We have both a demand shock, which is driven largely by COVID-19, and we have a supply shock where supply chains have been disrupted by people going on furlough or working from home or unable to work at all, where the oil prices have collapsed. We've had at least two different major economic shocks hitting economies globally. Usually we get one at a time. Here we have two. And so what we're seeing globally is the economic factors around business performance are pretty negative and have been for a few months. We're now seeing some upturn. You only have to look at the volatility of the stock markets to see how volatile these upturns are, and how the question about the sustainability of the oil price recovery from 20s or sub-teens in some cases back up to 39, 40, 41 at the moment, which sounds great compared to 20, but isn't as good as compared to 60 last year. So the oil exporting economies are all struggling with reduced revenues. And on top of that, you have consumer confidence shaken quite hard by what's happened in the last 3 or 4 months. And it'll take a while, and nobody knows how long, it will take a while for that to return to 2019 levels or better. So this year will be tough. Next year, hopefully, will be better.
What have you learned personally from the pandemic and this entire experience? Is there been a learning? Is there something new that you have tried out? That's something that you'll want to share with our viewers?
The big difference between COVID-19 and SARS, and I've known people who suffered in both cases, that COVID-19 is much more infectious, but appears to be much less dangerous. And if you look at the statistics of the mortality rates, much lower than SARS was. But it's the infection rate which is the concern. And I don't think really globally anyone knows how to deal with that. And so you have some countries working on a lockdown basis, other countries working on a non-lockdown basis. And I think it's the whole level of uncertainty, which is the big factor that has driven a lot of the decision making by government and by individuals and by businesses. And I think we're all still learning, and we will come out the other side because everyone always does. But we will, I suspect, change the way we do business, suspect the way we interact with each other socially in a corporate and business environment. There will hopefully be a lot of change. I mean, just as a reflection, back in 2003 in Hong Kong, we were talking about lifts having to go to voice activation, soap dispensers and taps have to be all sensor only. Some of that has come, but not a lot. I suspect we'll see much more change after this particular pandemic that we're going through.
A big fallout of the pandemic has been that it's made us more aware of the threat that humans have posed to the environment. And whether it is ESG goals or it is about environment sustainability, that has really come, this pandemic has brought them center stage. Now, as the HSBC group, are these concerns of importance to you? Are you doing anything about these?
Well, we are. The HSBC Group has had a strong ESG agenda for several years now, as we have here in Oman. And specifically, we're investing in two large areas over and above our smaller investments that we make all the time. Two large areas. Firstly, we've installed solar panels into our office car park at head office, which will provide 50% of the electricity needs of that building, including the air conditioning and everything that we require. The second thing, which is much more exciting in a way, is that we're building a second building in our head office area behind our branch for expansion purposes. And that building will be to full environmental gold standards, as well as we can make it in the country. And not only is that an investment in the future of Oman, but it's also an investment to meet our sustainability goals, and very positive story, I think.
Just a personal question. You've been with HSBC Oman for close to 6 years now, and you're moving on in a few months' time, or you're here till the end of the year, as you were mentioning. How has your experience been in Oman, and what are your final thoughts?
Oman is an extraordinary country. I've never lived anywhere like it, and one of the reasons I wanted to stay on once I'd handed over as CEO is because I wanted to enjoy the country to the full. The country and the people have been very welcoming. The business has been challenging. I met some fascinating people at all levels, from the highest to the lowest. And I shall look back upon the 6 years here as one of the highlights of my 42-year career with HSBC.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Andrew Long, for speaking to OER BLME. I hope now you get the time to explore the country, see and have a good time around, because I'm sure over the 6 years you would have really been hard pressed for time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mayank. And it's been my privilege to lead HSBC over these last 6 years. And I look forward to watching Oman and the bank with success in the future.